After years and years of modeling and learning and growing, I still make poor decisions. I am still working on revamping my model. There's one little formula in that's broken. I know why it's broken. I don't know how.
Well, what is it you enjoy so much about working on transactions?
What better way than through transactions? Then getting two businesses together and then creates more opportunities for more people.
Communication, storytelling. What role do those play in doing a QofE?
More important than the technical skills, in fact. I have been a poor communicator in the past.
So what's the number one lesson you've learned during your career that's benefited you the most?
When someone says something or does something a lot of times, if I ask them, hey, I think
Welcome to Financial Modeler's Corner, where we discuss the art and science of financial modeling with your host, Paul Barnhurst. Financial Modeler's Corner is sponsored by Financial Modeling Institute.
Welcome to Financial Modeler's Corner. I am your host, Paul Barnhurst. This is a podcast where we talk all about the art and the science of financial modeling with distinguished modelers from around the globe. The Financial Modeler's Corner podcast is brought to you by the Financial Modeling Institute. FMI offers the most respected accreditations in financial modeling, and that is why I completed the Advanced Financial Modeler earlier this year. I'm thrilled to welcome this week's guest to the show, Patrick McMillan. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul, how's it going?
It's going great. So just so our audience knows, Patrick's somebody I've known for a couple of years. We've developed a friendship. So if I give him a hard time during the episode, you'll know why. It's not
fully
me just being a jerk. Or maybe it is. We'll see. All right. So a little bit of Patrick's background. Patrick is a fractional CFO and transaction advisor at Amplēo. Amplēo is a Utah-based fractional executive firm. And he is known as the QofE guy. Doesn't quite have the ring of the FP&A guy, but not bad. He has over 2 decades of experience. He specializes in guiding companies through periods of growth, providing strategic financial oversight, and playing a key role in M&A transactions, which we'll definitely get into a little bit later. At Amplēo, Patrick collaborates with a team of more than 160 consultants. It includes CFOs, controllers, CMOs, HR professionals, all kinds of different fractional support to help businesses thrive and grow. He's known for his passion for numbers and energetic approach. He brings a fresh twist to the finance world, often sporting his favorite shirt, which you can see in the background there if you're watching this on video. Warning, may start talking about EBITDA. We might even bring that up because EBITDA, after all, stands for earnings before it tumbles down again, and earnings before I trick the dumb auditors.
I've heard the second one, not the first one. I like it.
There's others I've heard, but I can't remember them. I can never find them online. I should have wrote them all down. There's some great ones out there.
Controversial topic, and I love the controversy around it. And all sides are true, depending upon their point of view.
I go with the Warren Buffett school of thought. You know what Warren said about EBITDA?
Oh, yeah. Charlie Munger specifically.
Oh, yeah. Charlie was brutal. I worked for American Express. That's where I started my finance career. And, anyone who knows Warren Buffett's history, you know what company he has the largest stake in for most of his career? American Express.
Yeah.
Is the largest stakeholder. And so we never talked about EBITDA. So then I went to a private equity company. I'm like, why are we talking about EBITDA? All righty. So that's a little bit of his background. He's also really passionate outdoorsman. He enjoys riding a bike. I use that term loosely. We'll talk more about that later. Hiking.
I enjoy being on the
bike. Yes. Spending time in nature with his wife, Erin. All right. Tell me that worst financial model you've ever seen. You knew it was coming.
Absolutely. And I'm actually going to share 2 quick ones. One that was from a long time ago and one that is very recent. So the one from a long time ago, I was with a huge conglomerate of companies. I was their CFO. built basically after my job was threatened, rightfully so, because we had no idea what was going on with cash. I had no idea what financial modeling was. And so I just pretty much put together this huge, crazy, insane, long spreadsheet that I would go in and update every single day with cash in, cash out. And I'm talking, I don't even remember how many tabs it had, hundreds of tabs. We had, I think it was 45 entities, 55 bank accounts, 550 employees. And I modeled out to even the timing of when, on average, every single employee deposited or cashed their paycheck. It was back when paper checks, were still paid. Yes, I updated that thing. It took me about an hour every day to update it. The reason why it was horrendous was because of how long it took me, how cumbersome it was. And then when I finally moved on and resigned in my position and was training, we actually hired a CFO and a controller to take my spot. So I was training the controller on that spreadsheet, and he essentially just threw up. That's when I realized how bad it was. I had since, years later, talked with him, and he's like, oh yeah, we moved completely away from that very quickly. Don't blame him. So that's a long time ago. That was, I don't even want to say, years ago. Recently, yesterday, I was working on one of my own models. I did a pro forma for a gal who acquired a company, and a lot of things changed. I mean, changed drastically in it. And I am still working on revamping my model. And there's one little formula in there that's broken. I know why it's broken. I don't know how it's broken. So I'm still trying to fix that. So it's one of those things where, Paul, after years and years and years of modeling and learning and growing, I still make poor decisions. And so, yeah, they're my own. I own them.
Make you feel any better? I think my wife tells me that every day. And you realize that was a poor decision.
The difference is you deserve it.
Yes, I do. And I'd like time to go up to my room and think about it. That's usually my response. Now, if anyone knows Jeff Foxworthy, that's where it comes from. So we'll take a side note for 1 minute. Jeff Foxworthy, there's a song where he goes, when I was first married, I used to say to my wife, honey, what's wrong? It's like, I've since learned. Now when I can tell something's wrong, I look at her and go, honey, although I don't know what I yet said or did, I'd like time to go up to my room and think about it.
I love it. And I'm from the South, so I love Jeff Foxworthy.
Anyway, I probably just got myself in trouble with half the audience. But let's jump into the main section. I'm here to have fun too. So you are the self-proclaimed QofE guy.
You gave me that name, by the way.
You use it. What can I say?
I did use it. It was great. I thought about it for about 10 seconds and I changed everything.
Well, what can I say? I'm creative. So tell our audience, what is QofE? Give an explanation of what that is.
I love it. And I love this subject because it's so, in my eyes, so important. But of course, we all think what we're working on is important. So I want to break the word down. So QofE, quality of earnings. Let me break that word down. Quality, okay? Something can be of high, medium, or low quality. And it's in the eyes of the person that's holding it, right? Eyes of the beholder. So quality of earnings. How much is a company producing? Could be, and here's where we get controversial, right? Could be net income, EBITDA, cash. So there's so many ways to look at earnings. So quality of earnings, let's talk about what it isn't first, and then let's talk about what it is. What it isn't, it's not an audit. A lot of people think, oh, well, my CPA, my tax guy could do a QofE for me. Well, an audit will tell you what a company's doing that's in compliance with GAAP. A quality of earnings will tell you how they're doing it and why they're doing it that way. So that's really the difference. And it really digs and dives into not just the earnings, not just the income statement, but it takes a balance sheet to build an income statement, right? And so it looks at everything on both sides, statement of cash flows, net working capital. It looks at customer and vendor concentrations. It looks at trends. It looks at benchmarks and metrics. Hey, how's this company doing compared to other companies? And it also, there's the word, right? EBITDA. So it really looks at how do you adjust for EBITDA on a normalized basis. So here's my Bible right here, right? Quality of Earnings by Thornton O'Glove. This was published, I think, in 85. And he really set the precedence. There's two things, non-operating and non-recurring. Those two things need to be normalized. Non-operating. Let's say you, as a financial modeler, let's say you go and start doing car sales and you put those car sales in your income statement. That's not part of your normal operating income. That's not what you do on a normal basis. So we've got to strip out the sales and all the associated costs of those cars that you're selling, right? And then a non-recurring item. Let's say you go to Abu Dhabi, for a family vacation. It's not operated because it's a family vacation and it's a one-time event because you don't normally go out there. And so it's really a non-recurring item. And so we really look at normalizing earnings. That way we can understand, a buyer can understand how a company would operate on a normalized basis if and when and after they acquire the company. And it's important for both buyers and sellers to understand that. A lot of people don't understand that a sell side quality of earnings is very important too, because it helps a seller truly understand how a buyer's perspective is going to be on that.
I like it. And I get what you're saying of all those non-recurring items. I use that term kind of loosely because I still remember some of the companies I worked with. Every year they were non-recurring. You're like, okay, at what point are they no longer non-recurring? Right? And you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of subjectivity in that. I'd love, how do you make that determination if you see it, kind of something similar year after year? And I would imagine you get asked a lot of times, can't we just consider this all non-recurring? It's really one time. And how do you make that decision? Because that can make a big difference in whatever that earning is, right? Is it EBITDA, cash flow, whatever you're looking at, that number can be quite different depending on what goes into those adjustments.
Yeah, and we do get that question quite a bit. The answer to that is really, if it is actually reoccurring over a certain time frame, then you know what? It's an operating thing. It's something that happens in the business. I'll give you an example, and I see this not often, but at times. Marketing, okay? We tried a marketing project, and it didn't really spin off any revenues, and so let's count that as non-recurring because it only happened over a 3-6 month period. But I'm not going to remove that because typically, I'm not going to say all the time, but typically I won't remove that because it's a cost of doing business. You're trying your best to increase the revenue. It's associated with that. It's a failed project, but it was still cash. It's still something that you paid that just didn't produce any fruits. And so things like that. And I also
if you have an employee, right? If you have an employee, it's like they were going to work on something for 6 months. You can't just be like, well, if that project had failed, we would have fired them and then brought them back after 6 months.
Yeah. But you nailed it too, though, is it's still very, very subjective. It's very dependent upon, and that's where when I do, or my team or our firm, when we do a quality of earnings, we really try to understand the holistic picture. And that's the thing. A lot of people will ask, well, what sets us apart, or, other firms or anything. We have sat in those seats as controllers, CFOs, VPs of finance, FP&A professionals, where we really understand how, if I pull this lever over here, what's going to happen way down the road? And you got to look at a QofE that same way as well. And that's all part of FP&A. It's all trying to find out the levers and the knobs. How does that crank out stuff, and everything. So all of this it's really combined, and it's super important.
I hear you. There's definitely down the road implications and how does it impact everything. Well, let's step back. How did you get into QofE?
So when I first joined our firm, Amplēo, back in 2020, the CEO, or our director at that time, called me with a project. One of our clients had inbound interest from a private equity firm, and they needed their financials cleaned up and presented to the private equity firm. So I got in there and did that, presented, got the deal closed. And after that deal closed, the partner that was overseeing it called me and said, you just did a quality of earnings, which normally costs X amount of money, and we just charged Y. And I'm like, why? Why did we do that? Why? I need to learn how to do this. And so for the next several months, I really dug into and learned what QofEs are. I'd never heard of them before. So really dug into what they are, how to develop one, created our first model, which looks absolutely nothing like how it looks today. It was very, very rudimentary. And since then, we've really honed on that. We've gone through many renditions. And this became important to me, Paul, because I'll even rewind the tapes back a bit. So years ago, before I was the CFO of that company that I made that really bad model, I bought and sold a company myself. Super duper small, but I went through a transaction. I had no idea what quality of earnings, net working capital, or any of that stuff was, not before, during, or even after the transaction. I didn't understand what I did until now. And so all this really started kind of coming together. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is fun. This is something I really, really enjoy. And so that's how I got into it. And it's a blast. That's why I got the shirt. I may talk about EBITDA. I may talk about quality of earnings. I may talk about buying or selling a business because it's a blast for me. It's a numbers game. I've always loved numbers. I just really like them when they have dollar signs attached to them because they're fun. It's a game.
I love that. It's clear you really love and you have a passion for what you do. But right, you can deal with numbers in a lot of different areas in finance. Why do you like dealing with transactions? And I say transactions because usually a QofE has to do with someone exploring a transaction, whether it's a sell, a buy, a change of hands, a new investment, a merger, whatever it may be. But what is it you enjoy so much about working on transactions and the whole transaction side of QofEs?
Yeah, it's a couple of things really that it hones in on. Number one, I love the idea that someone, a seller, who has built a business, however big or small it is, can really find a way to pass that business on to someone or hand it over to someone who can crank it up to the next level. And while they're at it, the person that's selling it can really pull out what they've put in plus more. That to me is exciting because that person has built that business. They've supported their family. They supported their employees' families. And now through that transaction, they're able to do that again or do it more, or those employees will continue growing, or they will learn from that and go on to bigger and better things. So that's one. The other thing is something that I'm very passionate about is just learning about people and their stories and communication about it. A CFO really is nothing but a communicator about numbers and a communicator of stories of businesses and how those numbers have reacted in that business. And so what better way than through transactions than getting two businesses together, whether it be a person and a person or a company and a private equity firm or something like that, and can really combine their stories together. And that synergy just goes on and then creates more opportunities for more people, more families, more stories behind that.
Love it. So when I'm ready to sell my business, I need to come to you is what you're telling me.
Please, yeah, would love to help you do it. If anybody's ready to buy Paul's business, call him today.
I don't know how much it's worth. It's kind of hard to sell the brand since I'm the logo, but yeah, there might be a big goodwill impairment when I sell it.
Right? Yeah, because you're going to sell it for hundreds of millions when you only produce a few thousand a year anyway.
Pretty much. It's all about the brand. I have it on my balance sheet. That alone is like worth 100 million. The beard. All right, back to serious stuff. I'm curious with dealing with QofE. Are you usually the one building the transaction model, or are you building pro formas of how the company will look? So what part of modeling you're doing and kind of how does that work in the overall process?
Love this question because we've really developed kind of three very specific ways that we can help a company. Number one is, so the quality of earnings itself is more about historical analysis and then adjustments for what would look like a pro forma. We're not going to pro forma out 5 years on a QofE, but we'll really kind of help build a model to where you as a buyer, as an acquirer, can roll that into your pro forma. So that's one way. Another way that we can help is we do financial due diligence, which is quality of earnings is a component of it. But let's say you're going to buy a company that's not quite necessary to get a QofE. Maybe it's several $100,000 of revenue, not quite $1 million or $1.5 million. But we'll just do kind of a block of hours or hourly rate and do some financial due diligence, looking at historical stuff. And it's a very, very watered down workbook. on a QofE. Now, financial modeling, we also do pro formas, and I do this quite a bit on leverage buyouts, for example, or on a lot of private equity deals. So I'll do an LBO model where I'm doing a pro forma. I'm looking at the valuation, I'm looking at the returns, I'm looking at the debt ratios, I'm looking at the waterfalls, and I will pro forma that out for 5 years. And so that's and that doing the pro formas really helps me to be a better QofE guy, because I'm able to look at things from a future standpoint and say, okay, well, hold on a second. If the buyer's looking at doing this with the company, then I need to make sure and include that on my adjustments for the quality of earnings, because I'm doing the adjustments on how will the company run it on a go-forward basis, right? So it's really, that's the art and the science combined together. And so, yeah, modeling has a huge role in it, because in modeling, you got to look at things holistically. There again, well, it's the same thing for QofE. You've got to look at things holistically.
So I would assume at the end, you're giving a report with a lot of write-up, probably your model and some graphs and analysis. Is that the way to think of it? They get a package at the end. And they decide to look at that and say, okay, what does this mean to me on what I know about the company? So I'm assuming the QofE, at least what I've seen, that's usually done is once you get into due diligence. You go out and hire a third-party source to do your QofE. Most common is what, Big Four? They're doing a lot of those.
Yeah.
Investment bank.
Big Fours do a lot, top 20s. Then you have a lot of small individuals that kind of have a small firm, or you get a boutique firm like us to do it.
Yeah, I remember on the few transactions I worked in one of my last companies, we were using one, I don't remember if it was PwC or KPMG, but one of the Big Four to do all of our QofE.
They charge a lot, and they throw a lot of bodies at them.
Yeah, I still remember.
Not the knockdown, but they're expensive.
The one we got was a company that had been on a cash basis, so they tried to normalize everything in the QofE, and that was fun to read.
Yeah, our report, and you can actually, I think you'll have the link in our show notes, but you can actually go to our website, to Amplēo's website. We have a sample QofE that you can download and actually see what it looks like. It's typically a 30 to 60 page report.
Oh, is that all? Only 30 to 60 pages? I thought it was a whole book.
That's it. It's an easy read, 5 minutes, read it before you go to bed. You'll absorb it well.
I'll keep that in mind. If you could send me over one to help me go to bed. All right.
Well, there.
So you've been doing fractional work now for several years, sounds like since 2020. What has kept you doing fractional work versus just going to work for somebody full time? What is it you enjoy about the fractional?
Yeah. And actually, even before 2020, I was doing fractional work, but just as an independent.
Okay.
And so when I left the big conglomerate of companies, I picked up just some independent companies myself as their fractional CFO and helped them quite a bit, and then joined our firm in 2020. The reason why I enjoy that, Paul, is because I really like learning from several different opportunities and combining those best practices together. Plus, for me, I guess it's where I'm always like to have my hands in different pots and looking at different things and okay, so I like to go mountain biking, then I want to go hiking. I like variety, but I'm able to really apply those things in various ways. I've worked at the big corporate companies, and it's been a blast. I really enjoyed my times doing those. But then now the small companies, really seeing them with that growth excites me. And then being able to work with, the CEO who's also, doing the marketing, who's also doing some of the accounting, and saying, hey, you know what, let's take that off your plate and let's put that to an expert's plate, and then let you do what you do best, which is actually running, growing, being the visionary for your company.
FP&A guy here. And as you know, I am very passionate about financial modeling and the Financial Modeling Institute's mission. I have been a huge fan of the FMI for years, and I was super excited when they decided to sponsor the Financial Modelers Corner. I recently completed the Advanced Financial Modeler certification and loved the entire experience. It was top-notch from start to finish. I am a better modeler today for having completed the certification. I strongly believe every modeler needs to demonstrate they are a qualified financial modeler, and one of the best ways to do that is through the FMI's program. Earning the accreditation will demonstrate to your current and future employers that you are serious about financial modeling. What are you waiting for? Visit www.fminstitute.com/podcast and use code podcast to save 15% when you enroll in an accreditation today. Sure, it's being able to allow them to focus on what they're good at, maximizing their abilities and their skills. Because we all have only so much time in the day and so many things we're good at. We can't all be expert QofE guys and expert mountain bikers, as I like to say.
Now you're pinning me down.
All right. So I know you recently completed your MBA, I think just a few months back, if I remember right. So I know you did that probably a little later than when a lot of people go to grad school. What made you decide, hey, I'm in the middle of my career, I'm doing these quality of earnings, and I should go back to school and get an MBA? What was the thinking behind that?
Okay, I'm going to pull something back here and show you real quick. So this is because I said I would. Look it up if you've never heard it. What is it right here? Because I said I would. So when I was doing my undergrad, I knew I wanted to go on and get my MBA. I thought I was going to go straight through and get it right after, but I had a great job, so I wanted to continue on with that. And it kept just for the next 20, 25 years, it was, oh, I'll do it next year. Oh, I'll do it later. It takes time and money. And so a few years back, I was talking to some friends. We watched this actually a handful of times over a couple of months. We watched the TED Talk because I said I would. And I said, you know what? It's time. I said I'm going to do it. I'm tired of saying it. I'm just going to do it. And so I did. I'm glad I did, Paul. I'm very glad I waited because I did and you can call it the part-time professional executive whatever program.
Sure.
Okay. I was working while I was doing it, and I was able to apply things every single day. The day that I learned it, I was going down to class Tuesdays and Thursday evenings down at Utah Valley University, and then driving home. And that night I would log in and be like, I've got to do this right now. Or the next day I'd be like, hey, we learned about this last time. I'm going to implement it. Paul, it was life-changing. Absolutely loved it. So my why for going back to get my MBA was threefold. Number one, I love learning. I love education. Lifelong learner, right? Number two, I love networking and getting to know people, connecting. That's the key, connecting with people. I'm an accountant, right? 1 + 2 = 3. So 1, 2, 3. So my third reason is combining those two together. It's really learning together, connecting with people, and building businesses together. And I love that. And so I stay in super good touch. We're actually, next week, we have our alumni networking group. I'm super excited to go and reconnect with people. It's just, for me, it was absolutely worth it. And I know people are like, oh, well, I'm not going to change jobs. I'm not going to go and work for another firm or anything, at least as far as I know. I mean, that's not my plan. But this education really helps me to be a better QV guy, a better CFO, a better individual, a better spouse, a better person in my community. It's really helped me to look at things from a multiplicity of areas.
I love it. And I know you're a passionate learner. I know you and I have talked. I know you've taken some of my courses. I know you've taken other courses from people on LinkedIn in the finance space. Is there any course or anything that you've been like, I love that and I'd recommend that to others? Or maybe somebody you love to follow on LinkedIn that you've learned a lot from?
I'm going to give 3 names, Paul. And of course, you're one of them. I love following you. Your courses are great. I love chatting on the phone with you. And, I've called you and said, hey, how do I do this and everything? You've been fantastic. Second name will be Chris Riley. Phenomenal. And I know you've had him on the podcast a couple of times. Chris and I have chatted many times too. I actually sent him an email. He did respond, by the way.
Good deal. Yeah. I remember you and I talked. Anyone knows we had a conversation about something Patrick was struggling with. He's like, I emailed Chris to get the answer. Am I right?
Yep, you did. And Chris is phenomenal. He and I have had great conversations too. And Carl Seidman, he's phenomenal too. Carl and I, we've never talked in person, but on LinkedIn, we've messaged back and forth. He's phenomenal. So those, and I'll even name a fourth. I don't know how to pronounce his name, Super Bowl, I'm sorry. Bojan, oh my gosh, I'll have to look him up. Bojan something.
Rod, it starts with an R if I remember right. Yes, Rodmivic or something like that. I know who you're talking about.
are my 4 favorites to follow and to talk. And I've talked with all 4 of you guys, and many different ways too. Sometimes on the phone, emails, chats, text, LinkedIn, whatever. But I've learned a ton from you guys. And so I highly encourage people to go take your guys' courses, follow you guys, reach out, because all 4 of you will talk and answer too.
Yeah, great list. I've had many conversations with Chris. Chris is fabulous. I love his material. Carl is one of the best people I know. Incredible presenter, very thought-provoking. He'll make you think. So I agree with you. He's a great one to follow.
Yeah.
I've learned
His
a lot
videos
from
on
him.
LinkedIn are great too.
Yeah, and I've had the opportunity to meet him in person, and we've chatted a number of times. And
You've had him on the podcast as well.
yes, I had him on FP&A today, FP&A tomorrow, and next month I'm going to have him on Financial Modelers Corner.
Oh, good. Okay.
All right. So I'm curious. We've talked a lot about kind of, I would say, technical side of QofE, right? You got to write the report. You're doing modeling, pro forma, a lot of accounting adjustments. You have accounting background. But what role do the soft skills, communication, storytelling, what role do those play in doing a QofE?
More important than the technical skills, in fact.
Why'd you say that?
I can go through, I can do an analysis, I can do trends, I can make adjustments. But if I can't communicate about those, the why behind those numbers, there's absolutely no reason for me to do them. Because I have to be able to say, for example, if I'm adjusting, I got an email that said, hey, one of our companies had an audit. It was essentially as an insurance audit for all intents and purposes. And it was a $2.3 million adjustment to the insurance. They negotiated it down $700,000. And so we have to be able to communicate that adjustment, to be able to say, hey, here's what happened, here's why, so that the receiver of that can understand what the impact is. Vendor concentrations, customer concentrations. On another one that I was doing, it was a sell side, and it was a high, like 73% customer concentration. And when I saw that, I was like, there's no way this is going to go well. But after learning that that is actually very typical in that specific industry for this very specific reason, and how they're going to mitigate that risk, which is very important, okay, because everything's risky. It's how you mitigate the risk. Then that's how we're able on the sell side be able to present that and communicate that in a way to where a buyer, whether it's a strategic, which is very likely for this one, can really take that company and roll it up into their companies and reduce that risk. And so the communications, that soft skill, is utterly, utterly important. And I would even say most important.
So what is the most important soft skill? Is ability to communicate, storytelling? What do you think it is?
Communication is the component of storytelling. I have to be able to tell the story from a numbers standpoint. Why did this business do what it's doing, how it's doing it, but really truly communicate that to the receiver. When I do like a QofE, I have to understand who the consumer is going to be. Is it going to be a bank, that's loaning money because it's an ETA, an entrepreneur through acquisition, a self-funded searcher that's buying a company? Or is it going to be a sell side and there's potentially a private equity company? Or is it going to be a strategic, an existing customer or vendor that's going to buy the company? Because those are different ways to really communicate that story. It's not spinning the story. It's not trying to put things only in certain light. It's to communicate in a way to where you know your audience, right? You got to understand what the audience is used to, and then communicate it in the words and way that they truly understand it.
So true. You have to speak in other people's language. If you use nothing but finance terms, their eyes will glaze over and they'll look at you like, why am I listening?
Right? Exactly.
And we've all been there. We've all been in those meetings or done it where you're just like, oh, wow, that was painful. In a minute here, I'm going to get to some personal questions. But before I do that, I have 2 more for you. What's your favorite Excel shortcut?
Control open bracket and then F5 enter. Control open bracket will basically jump to what the formula is pulling from. And then F5 enter brings you back to that original point.
I think you're the 3rd or 4th person who said that one. I think that's now number 1 on this show as far as Excel shortcuts. It's either 1 or 2.
I love it.
That's a pretty common.
When I tell people about that, completely changes their life. It changed mine.
It's a great one.
I'll even combine it with something. And I was doing this yesterday. Control open bracket. And then if you're using Wall Street macros, as a control shift Y, which highlights the cells. And so if I'm going through and I'm making sure everything's covered, then I'll continuously do that.
Love it. So Wall Street macros, yeah, I'm taking it you use them.
I love Wall Street color coding.
Nice. So what's the number one lesson you've learned during your career that's benefited you the most?
Patience. It goes back to that. I have been a poor communicator in the past. I still am in a lot of ways, and I'm still learning a lot of ways. And along with that, communicating, it's asking questions to understand what their standpoint is. For example, a lot of times I'm a blue. When you look at the color code, I'm a blue. It's my favorite color, by the way, too.
Yeah, BYU, I know, I get it.
Relationships are so important. And so when someone says something or does something, a lot of times I'm like, did I offend them? And so if I ask them, hey, I think this is what you're trying to communicate, then I can understand that in a certain way and then be able to communicate back to them in a way that we could really learn and move forward in a great progressive way.
Love it. All right. So we're going to do the rapid fire questions, I think, next. And then I'm going to come back to the personal question. I think we'll end there. So you've listened to this a few times. I know you're familiar with the show. No, it depends. You have to pick a side. And then at the end, you can elaborate on one or two. So you get no more than 15 seconds for each of these. I don't even think you'll need that. Circular or no circular references in your model?
No.
VBA or no VBA?
No.
Horizontal or vertical model?
Vertical.
All right. Excel, dynamic arrays, yes or no?
Yes.
All right. External workbook links, yes or no?
No.
You thought about that one for a second. Named ranges, yes or no?
Typically, no.
Okay. Do you follow a formal standards when building your model, like FAST or SMART or any of those others?
My own.
All right. I get it. Will Excel ever die?
No.
All right. That was quick. Authority. I like it. Will AI build the models for us in the future?
Oh, it will not build it for... Okay, do you want me to elaborate on that one later?
You can elaborate. We'll say no. You're going to come back to that one. I'll let you talk to it at the end. Sheet cell protection in your models, yes or no?
Typically, no.
Fair enough. Do you believe financial models are the number one corporate decision-making tool?
Yes, and if they're not, they should be.
I like it. I had one person tell me politics, so, you know. What's your favorite lookup function? Choose, VLOOKUP. Which one?
XLOOKUP. Love it.
I like it. We're on the same page there. All right. I think you wanted to elaborate on AI building the models for us.
Yeah, elaborating on AI. So I use AI occasionally to help me. Actually, I use it often, for a lot of things, usually to make sure I'm clarifying myself in emails and stuff. Like I said, communications, right? But I'll use it as well to help me look up, different ways to do different formulas and things. I think AI will really help us to build models in certain ways, whether it be to start or get in the middle or end. But I don't really feel like, at least not in the near future, I don't feel like AI will build an entire model. I think it will enhance. Actually, I know it will because I've used it to enhance my stuff. But to do it just AI, I don't see that happening. I could be wrong, but that's my feeling.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We have a lot of different opinions. I think most people have said yes. I do think it will build a full model. It won't, but we'll still have to put in the assumptions. There's still going to be a lot of human judgment. And so there's part of how do you define build the whole model too, right? But I think we'll be able to do all the tactical stuff for us. That's just a matter of time. But there's still always going to be some level of human judgment needed. So I get it. Like one person told me, I think it was in Bennett, he's like, I don't like that question. That's not really the question you should ask. And I'm like, I know, but no matter how I ask it, there's a lot of nuance to it.
And you can say that for a lot of the questions too. For example, protected cells. Most of the time I don't. I love simplicity. I love being able to send a model to someone who can take it over and use it. And I can be completely hands off and hands out. But at the same time, there's times where I got to lock cells to make sure for whatever reason they don't get messed with.
Sure. I get it. All right. So that's our rapid fire question. Now we're going to get to know a little bit more about you because I know you're an avid outdoorsman. So what brought you to Utah? I'm curious. I'm sure you love the mountain biking here. Was it the outdoors or how'd you end up here in Utah?
Yeah, so I'm from Northeast Tennessee, Tri-Cities, the Appalachian Mountains. Let's make sure we pronounce it right, or I will throw in Appalachia. That's how you
Appalachian.
remember. No, my gosh, you're killing me, Smalls. While I don't have the accent, don't know how or why. I'm the youngest of 7 kids, never did get the accent. But anyway, so my ex-wife was married before, and she's from out here. So we met in Tennessee after my LDS mission and then moved out here to be closer to her family. After we got divorced, I said, you know what? I love it out here. I'm going to stay. I love the outdoors. I love the economy. I love the people. And it's actually a lot more involved, than, I mean, Tri-Cities is great. It's still a little small, it's small town, and so being out here it was fun. So I've been out here since I think '04. So about 20 years.
I love it. And I know you, like I said, love the outdoors. You love mountain biking. Any favorite stories or experiences you can share with us mountain biking? I've heard rumors that you had a little incident about a year ago or so.
So for those who listen, every single phone call Paul and I have, he loves giving me crap about this. So about a year ago, background, I've never broken a bone in my body. I've been wild and crazy, and hiking, backpacking, mountain biking, all kinds, playing soccer, all kinds of stuff. Somehow never broke a bone in my body until last year, mountain biking out here in Utah, a little place called Corner Canyon in Draper. Great spot. Check it out. Two buddies and I were mountain biking. We were going down a trail called Rush. So those who are from here in Utah know the spot I'm talking about as I mentioned it. I'm leading. I'm feeling pretty good. And I'm not usually a big jumper. I'm trying a little bit, but I'm feeling pretty good this day. So I'm jumping some. But at the very end of Rush, there's one more small, short, maybe 100 yards, if that. And there's a little spot where you can veer off to the left or to the right. I usually go right. Well, this time I decided to go left. And I took what I thought was a jump. It wasn't. It was a rock. It was actually two rocks. What I thought jumped the first rock and landed on what I know was the second rock, smashed into my handlebars, completely flipped over. And my buddy who was behind me saw the whole thing happen, and I can't breathe. My chest hurts. Well, long story short, I broke 4 ribs. It was hard. Now, here's the fun rest of the story, too. We slowly walked my bike back to my truck, and we're waiting on our other buddy who was behind us, or so we thought. Long story short, way farther up the trail, long before we even knew, he also crashed into a tree and lost consciousness.
Didn't know about
broke one rib and punctured a lung. It was just bruised a few. It was just, oh man. So both of us are at the hospital, in separate rooms. They're cleaning us up. This guy comes and cleans me up. Hey, what happened? I'm at Corner Canyon. I broke, my ribs. He's like, oh my gosh, must be in the water. I just treated another guy. I'm like, yeah, that's my buddy. We're up there too.
If it makes you feel any better, I've ended up in the hospital for people I've been, that have gone mountain biking. He had one in California where he ended up he hit a tree with his face. And yeah, it was not, he was quite sore. He ended up being fine, but he basically, it was the redwoods in Santa Cruz. He jumped over a log because a tree had fallen, and he got up and over it. He bunny hopped over it, but he lost his balance a little bit and ended up running into a tree. I think he probably would have been better just crashing over the log. But, hindsight is always 20/20. All right. So total side note, who's ever still listening at this point, thank you. That was a little total tangent. But if you ever come out to Utah, you like outdoors, mountain biking, come out and have some fun. Just don't jump off big rocks would be my advice.
Jump off them. Just make sure you know how to land them.
Public service announcement. Be safe. We'll leave it at that.
Be safe. Here we go.
All right. Let's go back to the financial modeling, the exciting stuff. So if you could offer our audience one piece of advice to be a better financial modeler today, something they should start doing, what would it be?
I'm going to copy Chris Riley, and I think you've said this, and I've known others to say this too. Model your own personal finances. That right there, I do it. I actually do it every single month. I close out my own books. and it's incredible. It's super eye-opening. It's a way to really do something that's at least a lot simpler than what a company would be. And it's very helpful to really learn how to do a financial model. So highly recommend that.
Yeah, Chris has recommended that a number of times. It's a great approach. All right. If our audience wants to learn more about the QofE guy, how can they get in touch with you?
Definitely. LinkedIn. It's the biggest, easiest, fastest way. I try to make sure I respond, within a day or two. So right there. Also, I think you'll have a link to our show notes to his website as well.
Yeah, we will. All righty. Well, thank you for joining me today, Patrick. I've enjoyed chatting, and you enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Will do. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
Financial Modelers Corner was brought to you by the Financial Modeling Institute. This year, I completed the Advanced Financial Modeler certification, and it made me a better financial modeler. What are you waiting for? Visit FMI at www.fminstitute.com/podcast and use code podcast to save 15% when you enroll in one of the accreditations today.